Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's museum moment. My name is Molly Dubin, and I am the curator here with the Jewish Museum Milwaukee, and I am excited to be bringing to you today a sneak preview of our brand new exhibit that is opening a week from Friday to the public with a great virtual opening the evening of June 16th. It's called Brother, Can You Spare a Dime? Jewish Artists of the WPA. And this is an originally curated project for the Jewish Museum Milwaukee. And I want to thank Arthur Cohn for sponsoring the museum moment and enabling us to bring you this sneak preview. So, a little bit of background. I am going to share my screen here and pull up a PowerPoint. And just bear with me for 1 minute from the beginning. There we go. So there is our hopefully really enticing graphic for this exhibit. Which features a metal worker right on the cover, an iron worker. So as you can see, the exhibit, as I mentioned, opening to the public June 17th, will be open through June 5th. So getting us started here. So the WPA, just to lay a little bit of a foundation, is the Works Progress Administration. And the Works Progress Administration was a program of the New Deal. The New Deal being a series of programs aimed at recovery, reform, relief, developed by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who took office in 1933 and inherited this very bleak, uncertain time in American history. And there were a number of programs that came out of it. Aside from those to put people to work, or included with those that put people to work, among those were artists. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that program, some of those programs, and the largest or best known, the Federal Arts Project, which is what we are going to be focusing on for our exhibit. So let's advance here. So 1929, of course, stock market crashes. The country is delved into a deep, dark, uncertain time. And one of the reasons we thought it was really timely to do this exhibit is there are a lot of parallels to what we have been experiencing during the Great Lockdown, if you will, the pandemic that has been gripping our country and our world for the last 14 plus months. Both of those, the Great Depression era and what we've been going through, unemployment reached levels of nearly 25%. So we have unemployment parallels going on. Businesses were forced to close. People couldn't pay their rent. We're struggling for basic necessities, as you can see here, demonstrated by both men and women in this line, trying to get some bread or a little bit of, basic necessities for their families. So, as we said, FDR comes in, inherits this very difficult situation, and develops the New Deal. He knows that work is really central to the recovery of the country, and so he wants to develop programs to do everything he can do to put Americans back to work, and that thankfully included artists. And that was really part of the discussion here, which we'll get into in a little bit, in terms of what is the artist's role in society and what is their function and how are they vital to our infrastructure. So many of you may recognize the New Deal as kind of being referred to as the alphabet soup of agencies, and that's because there were so many initiatives and many had acronyms of 3 and 4 letters, very easy to get confused. So we often see the kind of Campbell's soup can here affiliated with this series of programs. So you can see at the bottom there, the Works Progress Administration. So as we talked about, the Works Progress Administration was really about employing millions of job seekers to carry out public works, including construction on buildings, roads, but it also put artists to work. And it's rather incredible that out of this very difficult, challenging time in US history rises the most unprecedented government support of the arts. So much like today, as during the Great Depression, we have artists who are being given minimal wages to create work. The art that was created will today serve as a time capsule for an unprecedented time, as the work created under the Works Progress Administration's Federal Art Project does. People were fearful, isolated, uncertain times then, as was during the Great Lockdown, and both times resulted in a creation and response of artwork that really tried to encapsulate the time period, document it, and certainly reflect it. Under the Works Progress Administration, a number of art programs were launched, and they were tested. Initially, these were really to put art into public spaces. The government had goals with these programs. They were to, yes, give artists meaningful work, but also to try and bridge the gap between artists and the public, and also to lift the spirit. So there was a bit of an agenda in kind of wanting to create an American scene or an American aesthetic that was reflective of the country, coming out of the Depression, becoming strong, and showing the capitalism, the industrialization, all the advances that were taking place. And at the center of this was really the worker, the heroic worker. So the Federal Art Project is launched, and biggest and probably largest and well known, as I said, and there were thousands and thousands and thousands, well, actually millions when you include the prints, that were created under these federal art programs. And one of the interesting things is that there really wasn't a mandate in terms of the content. So artists could tackle whatever they wanted to in terms of subject. So there were artists who, while all were very appreciative of being put to work, there were artists who created pieces that depicted this, celebration of the American scene, certainly of regionalism, reflecting different areas of the country, different industries. And this was a revelation, as you can imagine, for communities and across the country who, for many, had never seen an original work of art, or had never seen a work of art that reflected them, their lives, their heritage. So this was a really exciting thing to happen. You also had working artists that more identified as social realists. So these are artists who are really using their voice and whatever their medium may be to reflect the hardships. They commiserated with the worker who was in a very difficult situation. They reflected the inequities in our society. So the time capsule that is the body of work that is this time period in the United States is a very interesting scene, and there are many contradictions within it. But for our purposes, we are going to be focusing on, here for our exhibit at the Jewish Museum Milwaukee, the images of the everyday worker, the laborer, and their environments, their landscapes. And we have over 40 artists represented in our exhibit, close to 70 pieces, paintings, sculpture, prints. Really the bulk are prints, and that makes a lot of sense because when you think about wanting to bridge that gap between artists and kind of the art community, and maybe what was thought of previously as art only being for a certain echelon of the population, this was, an opportunity and a goal to really build the appreciation for the arts on a much broader scale throughout the United States. And prints could be produced relatively inexpensively and in large quantities. So if you were someone who really wanted a piece of American artwork, but didn't have a great deal of money because you were worried about fundamental expenses, a print is something that would be within your reach. So I wanted to show some examples of some of the pieces that we have. And this piece that we're looking at right here is entitled Sweatshop, and this is by Boris Gorlick. So Gorlick was born in Russia, and his family came to the United States, moved to New York when he was 1, and that's where he lived the majority of his life. He worked under the WPA. He had previously worked for the Art Students League. There are several connections between artists that were part of the Art Students League and also part of federal art programs. And he really went into the printmaking program and focused quite a bit on social justice. And this is very much apparent in this work right here. So what do we see? A group of very haggard, worn women. They are hunched over sewing machines and cloth. Their body posturing, the way they are, really, you can see that they have been working very hard. They're tired. Their faces are worn. They've worked very long hours and I'm sure for very low wages. Certainly workers in, manufacturing clothing. This was an issue known to social reformers and advocates for workers' rights. And he's really exploring that idea with the laborers in this print, and also really somewhat distorting and exaggerating some of their body language to show, that wear, that anguish, it's all here. And really, standing over all of them and really mute, but just watching over everyone, which seemed to be, almost soulless in their presentation, is that mannequin. So witnessing this entire scene. Here we have the blacksmith, and this is an oil painting, and this is by Leon Garland. And this is an interesting piece too. As you can see, this is a blacksmith that is represented, and he's hammering on a horseshoe, and there's the horse poking through the window or the area, the hole in the area in the back there. And he's from Russia as well and immigrated to the United States in 1913, spent time living in Chicago. And this piece is really reflective of his childhood memories of his father and grandfather working as blacksmiths in Russia. And it also really glorifies the idea of the rural laborer at a time when we know that machinery is advancing, and slowly but surely there are going to be replacements for, the manual labor. And so we're really celebrating this, and it's very nostalgic. It's very also, social realist, and it's bent, also really exaggerated. When you look at his arms, the strength, the muscles, it shows how much work it is to be in this line of work, to be a blacksmith, but also really shows the strength, the tenacity, the heroism of the everyday worker. That's very much at play here. Nicholas Shine by Isaac Sawyer. So we have both Isaac and his brother Raphael represented. There were four actually of the 6 children were to some extent involved in the arts. They were all born to Jewish parents from Russia. And the family came to New York in 1910. And that was due to struggles they had faced in Russia, discrimination and dangerous situations that they wanted to escape. So Isaac here also, both Isaac and Raphael are known as social realist artists. So very much commenting on life around them, documenting everything that you see around them. So here in this print, really rather poignant, these two young children. So really indicating that, of course, the Depression affected everyone, not just the parents, but the children. And maybe the children, if their parents, if their father or their mother couldn't get work, they were out on the street trying to make a little extra change just to help support the family. So here are these two young boys sitting out on the sidewalk, offering literally a nickel a shine for a shoe shine. And the one has a cigarette in his mouth, probably very reflective of the fact that children during this era were forced to mature at a faster period. I mean, they experienced things that most children would not. They were many years that were plagued with difficulty and struggle. And you can see that in their faces too. The one boy maybe holding a bit of a sandwich that maybe he was able to get, but they are out there doing their best to help support the family. So last artist I wanted to mention is Max Arthur Cohn. And Max Arthur Cohn was born in London, England, but spent much of his life, grew up in New York, spent a lot of time in kind of the coastal territories. And he worked in many mediums, but is very well known for screen printing. And he is really known as a pioneer in this field, really prior to the 1930s, early 1930s, screen printing was really used for solely industrial purposes. So Max Arthur Cohn was one of the individuals that started applying it to the arts and using it as an art form. He was prolific, huge body of work, also created watercolors, oil paintings, and very recently a large donation of Max Arthur Cohn's work was made to the UWM art collection, both to the art history department and to special collections at Golda Meir Library. And that is very much due to his daughter, Jane, who was a long time professor at UWM. So we are thrilled to be highlighting a number of pieces by Max Arthur Cohn in this exhibit. So it really is just a sneak preview. So I just wanted to give you a taste and really encourage you to register for our virtual opening, which is just going to be really interesting and a lot of fun too. We are going to be having Dr. Todd Harvey, who works for the American Folklife Center, which is part of the Library of Congress, and he is the curator of the Alan Lomax collection there at the American Folklife Center. And Alan Lomax was an ethnomusicologist. So under the Federal Arts Project, there was not just visual arts, there were projects looking at music and at writing, collecting stories, collecting heritage. And so both Alan and his father, John, were among individuals that went out around the country and recorded, folk music. And among those was the individual and well-known artist known as Leadbelly. And so next to Dr. Todd there is Fruitland Jackson, who is an award-winning blues musician, and he is going to be regaling us with a number of well-known Leadbelly songs, including Goodnight Irene and Midnight Special. So we're also going to be giving a virtual tour of the exhibit. It's going to be a great night of WPA-sponsored art and music, and we would love for you to join us. So that's going to wrap up our museum moment for the day. I'm going to get out of here and stop sharing, and we will close this. And I will say thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you at our virtual opening and at the museum in person to see this incredible body of work that has really a tremendous legacy that is still impacting us today in terms of the question of government support for the arts and the role of artists and art within society. Thanks so much and have a great day.